Okay, I have my coffee. Let me pull this up. So, hello everyone. I am broadcasting now from my home, and we're headed into what is being called the dark winter, and it is very much looking very dark and very bleak. We do face a giant problem right now, and that is the dissemination of information. Yesterday, much of the phone lines completely failed. Much of communication had already moved back to an analog state, if that was even possible. And this is to add to continued failing for power for many areas. We lost contact with many of the people that worked with us that were reporters, basically on the field guys that went out and got all the information from us. That's pretty much non-existent right now. There's probably a couple of people that still hand out information, but it's handed out in a completely different way than it was before, and it's basically just borrowed information, if you will, of people who are on the ground and share the information that we have. There's no way of calling somebody on the phone and getting the information. There's no teletypes that can let us know what's going on. Obviously, I'm not even in any sort of office that would allow me to even put anything on the air that would be able to get back and forth between people to even do the communication like we had to. So this has left many of us to rely basically on, because of the power losses, these generators to continue to power our systems to be able to get information out to you, and that did not work from any studio format. So the other thing I want to do is I want to apologize for what we're going to consider as a crude broadcast, and realizing that I'm basically in a shelter right now. You realize very quickly why writers and editors become so important in our field, and when you don't have them anymore, the lackluster underpinnings, the dull veneer shines through the obviously fake facade of broadcast news. I mean, that's probably the most esoteric thing I'll sound like on this broadcast. But to put it more bluntly, no matter how much you polish the rotten floor of news, it's still busted wood beneath, and the flooring has most definitely come up. That was something that we continue to hear during the problems that were happening. It's not only was it the lack of information, but the incorrect information. It became a point of making things just come out as fast as they possibly could, and pushing things out quickly or getting any information out at all was a failure. It was the idea that people did not have a way of escaping this thing because they were getting information that was completely wrong. They did not know how to react because they weren't able to react because they were being told things like shelter in place, sit where you are, don't move, don't do anything, when the truth was is activity, action, saving oneself became very important, and sitting around was not the solution for many, and that has now become a huge problem for those trapped in areas that are surrounded by the infected. So I'm gonna do my best here to try to remember everything I've discovered so far. I had a ton of information. Most of it is just either just handwritten, scribbled, put together in a way that I can somehow get it out to you. But there's just a lot of stuff that's in my head that I've heard, that I really, we're trying to organize this in a way that it'll work better for everybody so we can get the right information out. So just bear with me as I pull it all together. So obviously the first problem we're going to face here is generator power. Generators are being used in much of the areas, but the power loss has been big for everywhere. Very few places have power or communication. But if you have a generator, these generators are going to require fuel, and we don't have a supply line to deliver it. No one to run all the gas stations. And the time for fuel, which is, it's a organic thing, it will break down. That time between now and when we basically run out of gas is actually coming up quick, and we're going to start running out of supply well before we ever reach that point where the gas is becoming basically unusable. Much of the gas stations out there have been looted. There's literally nothing left to siphon. And some have taken to roads or stations to like housing to acquire fuel from vehicles left abandoned on the streets or leftover oil. Basically scavenging groups that are doing their best to get us anything that they can. And I remember being told that the roads would be littered with dead cars and traffic jams as well. But the truth is that wasn't the case at all. There is very little when it comes to vehicles left in areas that are in any quality that would be, that we could take anything from them. There were no huge traffic jams. There was no big rushes out of cities. All that information was incorrect. It seems the biggest resource we did have when it came to recovering some sort of fuel was accident scenes that were never cleaned up as things began to transpire. But the hope for those is still that they didn't result in some sort of fire that burnt up all the fuel or burnt up the vehicles, and that happened in most cases, that there was really nothing left to take from these accidents, as most of the time you have an accident, they're put out, they're extinguished by some sort of first responder, and those didn't happen in many cases. So if a fire broke out somewhere, it literally gutted whatever it was involved with. We had building collapses all over. And the reason we need power is because we need to broadcast. Without that precious black gold, these generators don't run, the power doesn't flow, and the airwaves simply cease to exist. They become basically ghosts. And we realized very quickly that getting this information to you was important, and it was instrumental in your ability to take action in the future, or to know even the minimal information that was correct that was being handed to you. It's funny that only days ago I was sitting in an office sharing information, being told that we were making some sort of comeback. The military had reinforced our border successfully and had to begun to move in towards the interior at a pace that would make a tortoise and the hare look more like tortoise versus the snail, and at that point the snail was winning. Still, it was the first time that we saw light at the end of the tunnel. We started to see changes taking place, that things were actually effectively looking up. But the wording that I always say is that it's always darkest before the dawn, and we started to run into resource problems almost instantly. And it's hard to not understand that everybody is facing those. We did start to see a map emerging that drew a line through the center, what is now becoming sort of a staging point for these homegrown militia movements, a disjointed group of individuals that are bound by a common enemy and potentially, I would say, a patriotic effort. Many of them were expecting to be voting for the most powerful position in the world by now, and that hasn't happened. And the West looks, I would say, minimal at most. Few resources to feed the illness that ravaged the population, and that resource being people to infect, of course. It's possible that North Dakotans can't even get sick. Somehow they see very little, if at all, of the horror that has spread throughout the East, and especially Southern California. California's southern map is either on fire or is considered a war zone, where the new gold is a familiar element that you might know of called H2O, otherwise known as water. Vegas, it is basically a return to the desert. It's only leaving the infected to bang into desolate slot machines as they try to win something from the fog that's what's left of their mental faculties. We're not blessed to be in warm climates of the desert. We're considered to be living in, right now, what is considered ground zero. Even the woods of places like Georgia, Pennsylvania, and even Virginia are considered infection central. Areas like Boston are hoping for a quick winter to slow the onslaught. They're not even aware if the cold can slow the infected down, but another blizzard certainly would put the control back into the hands of the living, if you will, if they can survive that cold. So they hold out in makeshift camps, most notably Fenway Park, where the green monster has now become an icon for what they actually face. So yet, I sit here awaiting what resources I have left to dwindle to nothing. The hope is to keep the fuel running long enough to make it through until we can resupply or reopen the supply lines. But while we're doing that, to let you know where we stand. A job that the majority of broadcasters have completely given up on. Only a few even have rigs like mine that can broadcast at any length. Even doing this, I'm considered to be breaking the law, as the system of, we were told to stop transmitting and to send everything to the emergency broadcast radio signal to allow people to get the information they need. So I don't even know if what we're doing right here is what is a given. So we've left information as minimal as possible. And the truth is, who's going to enforce any of this? If we are breaking any sort of law, who's going to come after us and tell us to shut it down? And without regular communication, we've resorted to an emergency network of amateur radio operators ourselves who share this information from state to state to make sure that the information that we're getting is accurate. Crazy enough, it's becoming a basically glowing beam of hope for so many. What was initially a network of bad news and conspiracy theory has now become a way to report the holdouts in the news that shines a light that some areas in the West and Northern West are actually doing very well. And I doubt they're without problems, but those problems are far more limited in scope than what was taking over the news simply a short time ago. Their lack of problems is really what helped them become transparent in the communication process. Simply the information wasn't coming up that this was a safe haven to go to, and therefore it just never got broadcast. It never got relayed. The hope now, obviously, is the government and military will use those resources to move to those areas and use them as a staging area for the retaking of the U.S. and possibly even the world. It appears that most of military at this time is focused in the southern states, and especially the middle of America, formed together from each border, and the National Guard are communicating with them directly. Unlike a conventional enemy, the good news is they don't need a lot of resources to fight them. The bullet production is not as needed. This one doesn't need to have much more than hand items to take care of the enemy. Still, the military are facing shortages of manpower. The rate of people fleeing is high, but what we're hearing is that no military leader has said that they plan to enforce any policy for those that leave. It appears the consensus on paper is that desertion is bad, but those concerned about their loved ones is understandable. The idea that they need to be allowed to return without consequences, and in some places are being supported to check on their loved ones or find ways to help them escape in the same way that a mission would be sent into a certain area to extract those who are not well or under certain duress. So maybe the plan is to allow these individuals to go there to their areas and extract anyone that is still in those areas that's not well, or that is well, that is, from the infections, and bring them back in a safe way to provide them with protection. So, and that's the thing, is I think that they need to be allowed to return without consequences. And the reason I say that is because we're all that we have left. If we don't come back together and don't have a joining, we are going to learn very quickly why divided we fall. But together we are very strong, and that's been very clear in everything that I've seen so far. I hate to get very feely in this stuff. A lot of times we're told to be objective as reporters, but I think the rules of reporting have pretty much fallen out the window at this point. And the truth is to become very academic in the way that we're talking. The things that used to be looked over by us and in the daily race to say, we need to do little things, have forced everybody to think in a big way. We're not small anymore. We have to be unified. We have to come together against a common enemy. And we're seeing that a lot of these other places haven't done that. They've separated, they've fought, and we hopefully have a better way of coming together. That in every structure that we've created, at least underneath the foundation of what we have, has continued to hold that together. Even if the top of the castle looks awful and has not grown nor been built up the way we want it to, the foundation is still very sound. And those are the people that are making the difference in the world. And I don't think it's hard for anybody out there to join with them and realize that there is the common threat and a common good. So I think that's what people need to hear right now too. People are fighting for each other. People are still surviving. It's why I scrounge for gas daily, to keep this generator going, to keep the tower running, to keep this broadcast signal running, to give you, I want you to have hope. I want you to believe there is going to be a tomorrow. And I know it seems bleak right now. You may be stuck wherever you are. You may not hear this broadcast for weeks, months. Maybe it's being rebroadcast over an amateur radio signal. Whatever, however that information is getting out to you, it's becoming very important. And I'm relaying the fact that hope is still out there. Humans are surviving, and America is making a comeback. For the first time in a while, we actually do have something to look up to. The cowboys still exist. The sheriffs are still laying down the law. They're coming back to fight something, and we're breathing a sigh of relief because of it. The American way is working again, and for those stuck in cities or shelters, you can still hold out. There are folks still coming for you. There's still things that are happening, even if they're not happening from the center, that middle ground that we have that's moving out towards each area and trying to pull people back towards that center. Even if they can't reach you yet, you can do your own fights in your own different areas and keep the infected at bay, and just keep doing what you need to do to survive. I do have to add that this is a new world. What we used to know doesn't exist anymore. Maybe our future is walled cities and underground shelters. Maybe we never go back to what the world is a few short months ago. Maybe there is no point where this infection, this illness, this pace, that it never goes away. But we still need to survive, and we can rebuild. We can take the destruction that we've had over this short term, take a little bit of some bad news right now and then build back from it. So maybe that's the bad news right now. There's no hope for your cure. Maybe there never will be. Maybe this thing blows over, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's the flu, or maybe it's HIV, and we just have to live with it. I doubt that if we don't do something, there will be nothing. It's guaranteed. We have to take the action that we need, and we have to bring scientists back to do what they've needed to do. I've been told scientists are still sitting around trying to figure this out. But the truth is even if they are doing that, we can't stop and wait for it. Right now, we have to focus on what's important. We've learned a terrible yet important lesson that nobody is coming to save us. We're on our own, and we'll have to learn the rules together or we won't survive, and that'll be that. I just found out the reason for the power outage. For us, it's that the dead amassed around a local power station. They were continuing to run with a limited staff, and many fled the area as the infected broke through the gates. There was an explosion that occurred that left the station inoperable and unrepairable, and no one can return to the area. That imbalance of power destroyed different stations, and hearing this news makes me wonder if it's happened in many other areas. You don't realize how much of a system that we had before was balanced until that balance goes out of whack and everything collapses. Huge blackouts over various areas, all in an afternoon due to one substation. I do hope they shut down the nuclear power plants, and we heard that they had done that and that was the plan, but the truth is we don't know. I don't know how those stations that continue to cool cooling rods works, and that is something that I'm going to probably live in fear about. But we still have to continue on. As problems get added to our plate, we need to continue to bounce back to it. We heard that train stations and gas stations were also, as you continue to look for fuel, have become prime areas for the dead to basically lay in wait. And most of them are stopped. They're simply looking off into space. They look like basically statues. And it's a very weird sight to see it, because many had deduced that there would be a sort of herd movement or herd migration, and it's something that we weren't seeing. We were seeing more of a, all of a sudden just they stopped moving. They didn't have anything that motivated them, and they simply, I think, conserved energy is what it was. One person described it as anything with a flashing light seemed to attract them. But again, all this is all passive research. There's no expert that has studied the infected or looked at the new biology of the system. We just know that they live much longer than we were told that they would. Scientists early on said they could survive at most a month. Obviously that's not true. A person with a brain debilitating illness could probably survive a month without minimal food if they're able to find water. But these don't even follow that line of thinking. They're different. And it'll be something someone is going to need to figure out sooner or later, is how I think the word is etymology works, or however their process is. Like I said, not having an editor makes my words a little bit rudimentary. But anyway, obviously nerves play a role here, and a lot of people are having these nerve issues. So again, find a way to relax, find a way to play games, do something that makes some sort of normal life for that time. But until then, we don't know what draw these things to us. We don't know if they can smell us, can they see us, is it just muscle memory, or is there something else driving them? We don't know. I feel like they're like trapdoor spiders. They know where we need to go, and that's where they go to and wait for us. Originally, many people said they would go towards the familiar, and I think the reason that they would go towards the familiar is because they know where we would go if we were to go someplace to survive. Where would you go to survive? Your brain immediately says that's what they're going to do, and they go to places, and basically they're hiding. And it's insane to think about that. Like, going to places to hide, it's like a gigantic game of hide and seek, but the thing that you're finding is the thing that is attacking you. And who says they can't read information that says shelter ahead, or these people are hiding here, this is where to go? And those places became basically petri dishes or gigantic, appetizers for these guys. And off they went to check them out and cause all the problems. And we saw that continually during this thing. Everywhere someone went to hide, they ran into infected. So, and I wanted to talk about the supply lines, but it looks like there's a point when the system has to shut down for a while, at least to cool off before I broadcast again. So I'm going to get some more information to you next time. So again, we realize that resources are both our need and our boon. So if you have a radio and you have access to something that you can share these broadcasts, you need to do it. We need to get the word out to everybody what is going on, so that they can do something. Let everybody know we're still out here getting the word out, even if there are only a few of us, a couple at most. It's all that matters is that we're still on the air. Maybe like guardian angels, we need to let you know what's going on. Find some batteries, find some gas, whatever works to keep you in touch. Find somebody that can build stuff. I've even heard how to run these things on wood gas, or have made moonshine stills that become fuel to continue to run generators. There are still people out there that are putting in work somewhere. And that's the thing is we are still trying to make good out of this and let everybody know where to go as they find these safe havens, and how they work. So I also said that having antibiotics or other medications have been a huge need. So if you have that, get it out. I don't know if no one knows has a homegrown option for that, if that's even available. But we hope to keep broadcasting, as I said before, because we started to see a light at the end of this tunnel, and we don't want the power to go out and that light to fade. We need to get to the end before it goes completely black. I'll be back with that next broadcast very soon.